This is the Mortuary Temple of Pharaoh Ramesses III, a massive stone complex near the modern city of Luxor in Egypt. If you walk inside one of its courtyards, you'll see an amazing carving on the wall. The king himself is shown leading a group of captives to the gods. But these prisoners look different. They wear strange feathered headdresses, unlike anything the Egyptians wore. What's happening here? A nearby inscription tells a dramatic story. It says the foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once, the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before their arms. The carving names these invaders: the Peleset, the Tjekker, the Shekelesh, and others, a confederation of tribes now known to history as the Sea Peoples. Who were these mysterious people, and did they really cause an entire world to burn? To understand the chaos, we first have to understand the world that was lost. The end of the Bronze Age, around 1200 BCE, was a time of giants. Great empires, what some historians call a club of great powers, controlled the known world. In Egypt, powerful pharaohs of the New Kingdom ruled a vast territory. In modern-day Turkey, the Hittite Empire was a military superpower, controlling lands from the Aegean Sea deep into Syria. And across the sea in Greece, the Mycenaean kings built huge palaces in cities like Mycenae and Pylos. These kingdoms were connected in a complex web of trade and diplomacy, the first truly globalized world. They wrote to each other, traded with each other, and depended on each other. The lifeblood of this age was bronze, the metal that gave the era its name. But to make bronze, you need two other metals, copper and tin. The problem was, copper and tin were rarely found in the same place. Most of the copper came from the island of Cyprus, while tin had to be shipped from mines as far away as modern Afghanistan. This meant that for any kingdom to build an army or make tools, it needed peace and open trade routes. Great port cities like Ugarit on the coast of Syria grew rich by acting as middlemen, where ships loaded with copper, tin, grain, wine, and pottery crisscrossed the sea. This interconnected world was prosperous and powerful, but its greatest strength was also its greatest weakness. If one part of this delicate system broke, the whole thing could fall apart. Around 1200 BCE, the system began to break. The first great power to fall was the Hittite Empire. For centuries, they had been a dominant force, but their kingdom was in trouble. They suffered from food shortages and instability within the royal family. The final blow came swiftly. The mighty capital of Hattusa, a fortress of stone high in the mountains of Anatolia, was destroyed in a massive fire. But archaeologists have found a strange clue. It seems many of the city's people had already left before the attack, taking their valuables and records with them. The Hittite kingdom was already a ghost town when the invaders arrived, a sign it was collapsing from the inside long before it was pushed from the outside. Further south, on the coast of Syria, the wealthy city of Ugarit faced its own end. In the ruins of the city, archaeologists found clay tablets that had been baked hard in the fire that destroyed them. These tablets tell a terrifying day-by-day story of the city's final moments. The king of Ugarit, a man named Amurapi, exchanged panic letters with the king of Cyprus. The king of Cyprus wrote a warning. Enemy ships have been sighted at sea. Surround your cities with walls, be on the lookout for the enemy, and make yourself very strong. But the warning came too late. Amurapi's reply is one of the most desperate messages in ancient history. He wrote, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. They have been setting fire to my cities and have harmed the land. Doesn't my father know that all my infantry and chariot force are stationed at Hatti, and all of my ships are stationed in the land of Lukka? They have not arrived back yet, and the land is thus prostrate." Ugarit was defenseless. As a vassal to the Hittites, its army and navy had been sent away on the emperor's business. The very system of alliances that was supposed to protect them left them completely exposed. Soon after, Ugarit was burned to the ground and never inhabited again. The wave of destruction didn't stop. Across the sea, in Greece, the great Mycenaean palaces also burned. The legendary cities of Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos were all destroyed. At Pylos, clay tablets found in the ashes of the palace describe the kingdom's last actions. They tell of watchers guarding the coast, a sign that they too knew an attack from the sea was coming. The tide of destruction rolled south, toward the last great empire still standing, Egypt. The Egyptians had faced these sea raiders before. About 30 years earlier, around 1207 BCE, Pharaoh Merneptah fought off a combined invasion of Libyans and Sea Peoples, including groups called the Sherden and the Shekelesh. He defeated them, but it was clear the threat was not going away. Now around 1177 BCE, a much larger wave was coming for Pharaoh Ramesses III. The inscriptions at his temple at Medinet Habu describe a massive two-front war. The Sea Peoples attacked by land through Syria and Canaan, and by sea aiming for the rich Nile Delta. The reliefs of the land battle show a chaotic scene of Egyptian chariots clashing with the enemy. But among the soldiers, the Egyptian artists carved a critical clue that changes how we see these invaders. They carved images of simple ox carts, loaded not with weapons, but with women, children, and all their belongings. This wasn't just an army. This was a migration. These people weren't just raiding, they were moving, looking for a new place to live. The final showdown happened at sea, in the mouth of the Nile River. Ramesses III set a trap. He let the enemy ships sail into the narrow channels of the delta, then ambushed them with his own navy and archers lining the shore. The Egyptian reliefs show a brutal battle. The Sea People's ships, with their distinctive bird-headed prows, are overturned. Their warriors, wearing the same feathered headdresses seen on the captives, are thrown into the water to be captured or killed. Ramesses declared a great victory. He had saved Egypt, but the world he knew was gone forever. So, who were these people who brought an age to an end? First, it's important to know that Sea Peoples is a modern name. They were not one nation. They were a loose alliance of many different tribes from many different places who banded together. Egyptian records name at least 9 different groups over the years. For most of them, we can only make educated guesses about where they came from. But for one group, the evidence is very strong. The most famous of the Sea Peoples were a group the Egyptians called the Peleset. Scholars are almost certain that the Peleset were the Philistines, a people who settled on the coast of Canaan and are famously mentioned in the Bible. The evidence comes from 3 places. First, the names Peleset and Philistine are very similar. The Bible also says the Philistines came from a place called Kaftor, which most scholars believe was the island of Crete or somewhere else in the Aegean Sea. Second is the archaeology. When the Philistines arrived in Canaan, they brought a new culture with them. At Philistine cities like Ashkelon and Ekron, archaeologists have found a unique style of pottery that is almost identical to the pottery made by the Mycenaean Greeks. Their buildings and religious objects also look like those from the Aegean world. The final piece of the puzzle came in 2019. Scientists were able to test DNA from skeletons found in a Philistine cemetery in Ashkelon. The results were amazing. They found that the people who lived there right around 1200 BCE had a large amount of DNA from southern Europe. This European DNA faded over the next few hundred years as they mixed with the local population. The science confirms the story. The Peleset, or Philistines, were migrants from the Aegean world who had moved into the Levant. For the other groups, the clues are faint. The Shardana are often linked to the islands of Sardinia, and the Shekelesh to Sicily, mostly because the names sound similar. The Lukka almost certainly came from an area in southwestern Turkey that was known as the Lukka lands. It is likely that the Sea Peoples were not a single group that started in one place. They were more like a rolling snowball. They may have started as migrants from the west, but as they moved through the collapsing Mycenaean and Hittite worlds, they likely picked up survivors and refugees along the way. The force that crashed against Egypt was a mixed group of desperate people from all over the crumbling Bronze Age world. So, did the Sea Peoples cause the Bronze Age collapse? For a long time, that was the popular story. They were seen as mysterious invaders who single-handedly brought down the great civilizations. But today, most historians and archaeologists believe the real story is much more complex. The great kingdoms of the Bronze Age were already sick, and the Sea Peoples were more of a symptom of the disease than the cause. The real culprit was likely a perfect storm of disasters that hit the entire Mediterranean world at the same time. The biggest factor was probably climate change. Evidence from ancient pollen, tree rings, and cave formations shows that a severe centuries-long drought began at 1200 BCE. This drought caused widespread crop failures and famine. We have letters from the Hittite king begging Egypt for shipments of grain just to survive. This famine led to other problems. People were starving, which likely caused internal rebellions and class wars, with the poor rising up against the rich who controlled the food. On top of that, the region was hit by a series of major earthquakes, sometimes called earthquake storms, that destroyed cities and infrastructure. The Bronze Age was a line of dominoes, and all of these disasters, drought, famine, earthquakes, and rebellion, were pushing them over. The Sea Peoples were not the ones who started the chain reaction. They were likely the first dominoes to fall. They were probably refugees, fleeing the same climate-driven collapse in their own homelands. In their desperate search for a new home, they became raiders, attacking other kingdoms that were already weakened and on the verge of collapse themselves. They didn't start the fire, but they helped spread the flames. They were both victims and villains in a tragedy that consumed their entire world, convenient scapegoats for a collapse that had much deeper roots. If you found this journey into the Bronze Age collapse fascinating, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into ancient history, and let us know in the comments what mysteries from the past you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next adventure.